Welcome to Women Getting Lit, books with benefits for women over 50. Women Getting Lit is a book review podcast for women over 50 who prioritize their health and well being. We're your hosts, Jennifer Hassey Morris and Sherry Israel, co founders of Aging Greatly Enterprises. Aging Greatly supports women over 50 with practical strategies across 5 essential pillars for longevity and sustained quality of life as you age. Through our programs, coaching, and our community, you'll discover that aging greatly isn't about following someone else's formula. It's about designing a vibrant life that's authentically yours. Our mission is simple but powerful: to inspire you to add years to your life and life to your years. During our book review, we'll give you an evaluation, what we think about a book, a couple of key themes from the book, and a personal takeaway, and a couple of action steps that you can implement. So, Sherry, kick us off for today's book.
Our book is called This Chair Rocks, A Manifesto Against Ageism, and it's written by Ashton, Applewhite. When Jennifer and I first started Aging Greatly Enterprises, our goal was to help women really embrace the next 20 to 30 years of their lives, and we wanted women to revel in the value that they bring to not only themselves, but the value they brought to their families and to society as a whole. But many of us really engage in ageism, and it's a very detrimental practice in which we talk about ourselves in a way that's negative because we are older. It's very prevalent in the United States. It's in commercials. I particularly do not like the Progressive insurance commercial in which they're trying to teach young adults not to be like their parents. Or I've always loved the Maxine cards that Hallmark had, or even the ones that have little funny things about hearing loss or whatever. But I always thought those were kind of funny jokes. But then I've come to realize after reading this book that perhaps I was participating in something that wasn't so positive. It's really important that we begin to recognize that, because we reinforce it ourselves when we talk about our age as a negative. I can't do something because I'm older, or I've had a senior moment, or whatever. There's really some repercussions from that. And it's important we begin to recognize that and we begin to push back against that for ourselves. One of the things that Jennifer and I really liked about this book, This Chair Rocks, it's one of the books that really provides data about why those ageism beliefs are false. And so we are going to share some of that information with you all today.
The book, This Chair Rock, it really is thought-provoking. And I forget how we actually came across it, but it does call out, and I think the author, Ashton Applewhite, really does a good job of balancing the difficult, the challenging, the really like just kind of outright flagrant issues of ageism that do occur in the US, and balances that with meaningful information really about the positive benefits of aging greatly, pun intended. So she really focuses on this strong bias that you really see in lots of ways that Sherry just talked about that exist toward people as they age. So even we olders, Sherry and I fit that category of olders or elders. So sometimes again, we contribute to that. We internalize negative ageism beliefs, despite being part of that category, but, that the category that's being discriminated against, we actively participate in it. So, as Sherry mentioned, there are several myths that are related to older people, like being a drain on society financially or medically or in the workforce. And you know what? She takes those on. So, Sherry, let's bust a few of those myths.
One of the things that the author really talks a little bit about that I found interesting as part of she talks about how we all want to grow older. Nobody wants to die young. Everybody wants to be older. And yet we also approach that with great dread. So I think one of the values to the book is really that she takes on these myths and she dispels them. So we thought we would share a few of those. Myth number one: growing old only means poor health, inability to enjoy your life, and becoming irrelevant to your family and your friends and your community. What's the truth, Jennifer?
Absolutely false. There is some great data in the book that many people, like really well into their 80s and 90s, my husband happens to be an example of that, enjoy their lives. And the majority of older people are actually happier than the data that is reported for people in their 20s. And it really comes down to something simple. People, as they age, learn not to sweat the small stuff.
So myth number 2 is that older workers are a burden on the workforce. Jennifer, what's the
So
truth?
absolutely false. So there are a number of there's a number of statistics that she runs through, and some of which I was not familiar with. But a couple of things, like if you really break down people who are older in the workforce, people in their 50s and 60s, they rank higher scores in a number of different leadership skills. Like they might known to be slower about a task, but they are better at detail-oriented tasks than younger workers. Supervisors indicate that workers who are older, they're absent from work less often, they have fewer accidents, they work more harmoniously with others, better in teams. Older workers also have much greater patience with colleagues and on work-oriented tasks, and they have found that they have better emotional coping skills. It sort of stands to reason as you mature, a lot of people develop greater emotional intelligence.
Awesome. Myth number 3 is that older people place a financial burden on society. Jennifer, what do
And this is
you got for the
absolutely the opposite. Yeah. Absolutely the opposite. So she has some good data from her own information as well as some data from AARP. So spending by those, and I have my notes, so I'm going to read it specifically. So spending by those who are 50 and older accounted for $5.6 trillion in 2015. So that is 10 years ago. So imagine how much higher it is now. So overall spending supported at that point more than 89.4 million jobs, or 61% of all US jobs. That their spending supported that. Also, in addition to work in a corporate setting or small businesses, etc., older Americans provide unpaid volunteer work that was valued at 75 billion, that's billion dollars. And according to the US Department of Labor in 2021, this is really interesting. A little more than 2 million children, just over 3% of all US children, are being raised by a grandmother.
So truly, as you look at those myths dispelled and the data that goes along with them, we have much to be proud of and recognize that we are huge contributors to society in all kinds of ways. So we had wanted to share a few takeaways, and I particularly wanted to share 2 with you all, takeaways from the book that I thought might be of value. So for me personally, one of my takeaways was that I must be careful about not internalizing ageism beliefs that are false. So for example, many people, when they reach a certain age, start to tell ourselves, I can't do that activity, I'm too old, or that clothing style is not something I should be wearing at my age, or I can't go do that adventure or make those friendships because I'm just too old. And so we limit ourselves. If fear takes hold and we don't really live the potential we have for the next 20 to 30 years. We all know women who've had incredible adventures over the age of 50. My dear friend Sarah hiked the El Camino at the age of 79. We also know people who've started new businesses. We know people who've started relationships, have fallen in love. Our friend Jane, Jennifer and I have a friend named Jane, and Jane's grandmother, back when we were in our late 30s, early 40s, she married at the age of 70. And we were like, whoa. And we would giggle and laugh about that. Now, as I approach closer to that age, I think, oh, you go, girl. People should live their lives and enjoy their lives and not limit ourselves. And I'm guilty of that at times, and I really want to work on that. Growing older is a privilege that not everyone gets. I really want to make sure I maximize and encourage others to maximize what you do with that time. The second takeaway I wanted to share is that I'm a caregiver for a parent who is aging and in her mid 80s. And we're kind of approaching that place where we need to do some transitioning. And it's a really tough subject to have. And the book really points out a number of things to think about as either you or someone you love is aging and you're beginning to have those kinds of conversations of extra care or help or whatever it might be. The thing that was a really big takeaway for me in that was to remember that my parent is a human with her own thoughts, her own life, her own desires. And although she can't do exactly the same things, perhaps that she could, and we do have to give some thought to how we minimize fall risk and different things. However, it's important to take into account when we're having conversations to let her share her thoughts and her ideas and make them her own. So I really hadn't given that a lot of thought because we're just entering this really tricky time. But I really want to encourage others to be thinking about that. And this book has a really good outline of ways to do that, ways to think about that. It also encouraged in the book for me to begin to think about what do I want as I'm aging and begin to think further out into the future. What is it that I want as a transition process? Jen, how about you?
Um, there's a story in the book, a metaphor in the book. For those who have the book, it's on page. It starts at the bottom of page 204, and it's based on a Mexican saying, "The appearance of the bull changes when you enter the ring." And it's about this idea that, we might have all these views about how our life is going to change or be different, right? Like when that matador hops in the arena, the bull looks different than when it's behind that gate. So the bowl looks different. And I actually used this story. I was facilitating at what's called a hosted conversation with a group of people. The majority of the group were over 60 or 70 for a local senior services organization, and really talking about what do you feel like the community wants and needs. And so there was an opportunity. Somebody said, now that I'm 70, 70 looks different than I thought 70 would look when I was 40. I mean, yeah, the bull looks different in the arena, but the connection, for example, to what you and I, Sherry, are doing, we talk about, the absolute necessity to have an action plan, like not somebody else's formula, not what works for somebody else, but what works for you. And that you revisit that each year or every several years because the bull looks different. Your life is going to be different 2 years from now than it is today. So that is a good reason to be revisiting that. There's also some really great data, that talks about, this idea that, work we love can actually keep us alive. And there's a super dramatic story actually in the book about that. That if we do stay active and we work, so you might retire in the traditional sense, retire from a corporate job or retire from working for someone else or doing something in particular, but then continue to work in some way well into your 60s, 70s, 80s, and that can actually keep you alive. The story in the book is really quite dramatic about someone who was an acclaimed psychologist, very active, really well regarded in her field, and she was severely burned in a kitchen accident. And as part of that, she developed an addiction to the painkillers. And so she just thought, I'm just going to move into a nursing home and this is where I'm going to die. And somebody called her after she had been there. It was somebody, a director of an institute in Germany, berating her for dropping off the face of the earth. He declared to her, "You're on the June program," and then hung up. And she said, "Okay, well, I guess I have to get ready for that." So it's this really, great example of, yes, life is going to look different and it can be just as impactful and just as meaningful. So similar to Sherry, I know that I have to check my own unconscious bias at times when I am coaching people, when I'm coaching people who have been laid off, for example, and they're in their late 50s and talking about how hard it is, the job search process, and how hard it is. And I really have to remember and balance, when I buy into that, and I'm not minimizing that. I know that they absolutely do feel the impact and the impact of ageism. I do know that it is real. And so I'm not minimizing that, but also talking about what does that free you up to do and to do differently. I also have to really think about following my own advice. I was coaching someone who is older and said that she didn't want to play tennis anymore because she couldn't compete at the same level as when she was 30. And she was not budging on it at all. And I said, well, does Serena Williams play at the same level? Do you think Serena or Venus Williams will play tennis at the same level when they're 60? And she had to laugh. And I'm here to confess, I'm not sure it was a really effective coaching technique, but that like really paying attention to what is that realistic expectation? How are we getting in our own way? And what is a way we can allow ourselves a little bit of grace to move away from that?
So Jen and I wanted to offer some action steps perhaps from the book that you might try. The one that I wanted to share is have your hearing checked. Now that might not seem intuitive, but hearing affects your balance, and having poor hearing triples your risk of having a fall. We all know that after 65, having a fall is very detrimental to health and can even affect your longevity. Hearing loss is linked to depression and it's linked to dementia, and only 30% of the people who need to have their hearing checked actually do so. So it's very, very important, and it might be something you hadn't thought of before. So I would encourage you to have your hearing checked as one of the actions in the book.
Great suggestion. I'm a proponent of that as well. And I'm going to do an action step. It actually comes right from the introduction in her book, page 4, right out of the gate. It caught my attention right away. There's this statistic that is in bold. Only 2.5% of Americans over 65 live in nursing homes. And you might be wondering, like, why are you pulling that out as an action step? It was just this good like zinger for me at the beginning to realize, really? Is that all? It seems higher. It feels higher. It seems like more. It's like I hear more and more people. The bowl looks different. So it was just this great reminder. No, wait, that is just a small percentage of what people participate in. But why I say it's like, oh, like it got me right at the beginning. I'm like, I'm going to learn some different ways. I'm going to reshape some of my biases. I'm going to let go of what was absolutely ingrained in me growing up. My mother was absolutely terrified of being in a nursing home and dying in a nursing home. And, the way that we cared for her at home is very different than the way I would care for someone older in their home now. And that's because things improve. There are lots of different options. So, continuing to educate myself about all the different options. My husband is older than I think I've mentioned that on a previous podcast. We have a very clear, a simple plan for ways that we would modify our home if either one of us, would become immobile or have mobility issues. But just recently, just really starting to think about that again, starting to think about, oh, well, or here's another option, here's another option. So it just really is this sense of what we're getting at in terms of increasing both the years, adding years to your life and life to your years, is that the longer you live, the more options you're going to have, the more things that will be available to you. And so continuing to keep your mind open to those different options. So I really credit her book and the way that she really talks about aging and ageism for being open to that. So We hope that you will enjoy the book as well. Thank you for joining us on Women Getting Lit, books with benefits for women over 50. So if we piqued your interest in something or shared something you'd like to know more about, we encourage you to purchase the book. She also has a great website. Or it could be a really good book for your book group or a group of friends to stimulate some pretty interesting dialogue. So thanks for joining us today. Follow us wherever you're watching or listening to this podcast to make sure that you get the next book review in a couple weeks. See you in the next book.